All right, welcome to the fourth day of notes of the fourth unit of the spring semester of Pre-Cal seniors. So what we have on this page are called limosons. So they're not quite roses like what we did on the last one because we have this a plus or minus b in both of these, and we have cosine and sine. So these are called limosons. Roses don't have a plus or minus. So bear with me with these notes. I'm going to go through some information as I am graphing each of these. So just make sure that you're paying attention and holding off any questions until we are done. Because all four examples are going to cover all four limosons as well as all four ways of graphing these limosons. So the first limoson that we have is called a cardioid. Cardioids are very similar to hearts, so we like to call these hearts. So cardioids are going to almost look very similar to hearts. There's going to be some information on these formulas. A is this number here, and B is always being multiplied to cosine. So the first thing you need to figure out is what we call the major axis. The major axis is where the majority of this limoson is going to be. So since this is a plus sign, the major axis is going to be on the positive, and since this is cosine, it's going to be the x-axis. So the major axis, the majority of my graph, is going to be on the positive x-axis, which is going to be to the right. Then I'm going to ask you to do some simple arithmetic. I'm going to ask you to figure out what a plus b is and what a minus b is. A plus b, well, a is 3, b is 3, so if you add those up, you get 6. A minus b, well, a is 3, b is 3, so you end up getting 0. When a minus b is 0, that's what creates a cardioid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to this graph, and I'm going to kind of plot some information. So the major axis, like I said, is the positive x-axis. That's where a plus b is going to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and plot a point. Then the minor axis is going to go in the opposite direction. So I'm going to start at the origin, or the pole is what we call this, and go a minus b, which is 0, so I have a point there. Then the way that we graph limosons is in the perpendicular axis, which is going to go up and down, is going to go a length of a. A is only 3, so 1, 2, 3, point there, 1, 2, 3, point there. So what I'm going to do for the sake of notes is I'm going to label those axes. So I'm going to label that this was a plus b, this was a, and this was a. And like I said, this is called a cardioid, so it's going to look like a heart. So it takes some time to kind of get used to how you draw this, but what you want to do is kind of make sure it's nice and round. So there's your cardioid. Looks something like that. Again, just trying to make sure it's nice and round. I'm going to kind of fix this left-hand side because I'm not too much of a fan of how that kind of looked out. Oh, that's probably about the same, but there's your cardioid. That's what a cardioid looks like. Well, like I said, we're going to go through all four different axes. So we're going to have the positive negative x and the positive negative y-axis and kind of go through all of these. So what I'm going to do here is I like to first figure out where is my major axis. Well, since this is negative, we're literally going to be on the negative. And since we're dealing with sine, that's why we're going to be on the negative y-axis. A is going to be 4 and B is going to be 6. So when I ask you to figure out what is A plus B, well, it's 4 plus 6, which is 10. And I have some people that ask, like, well, I thought 6 was negative. No, that negative sign determines if it's a positive or negative axis. The B and A on its own are always positive. So when you do A minus B, you do 4 minus 6, which is going to be negative 2. So again, the major axis is going to be the negative y-axis. That means the longer part of my graph is going to go down. And then, yeah, so A plus B was 10, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and plot a point. But then, like I said with the cardioid, we're going in the opposite direction, so I'm going to go up -2. Well, how am I supposed to go up -2? Well, you don't. You go down +2. So going up -2 is going down 2, and with this limosón, we're still going to need to go through the origin. So we need to have that polar point too. Like I said with the limosón, the perpendicular axis, which is going to be left and right, is always going to go A. So A in this case is 4. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and plot points. So this is going to be very similar to a cardioid, where it's going to look something like this, because it has to go through that pole for this one. But then what ends up happening is you end up getting this kind of loop on the inside. So again, what I'm going to do for the sake of notes is I'm just going to label that this was A plus B, this was A, and then this in here was A minus B. So this limosón is what we call a limosón, wrong color, with an inner loop. Or you can call it inner loop limosón if you want to. In this class, you don't have to really state what the graph is, but it's nice to know if I ask you like, hey, graph me a limosón with an inner loop, and you know what that looks like. All right, so that's what happened if A was less than B. So if A was equal to B, we had a cardioid. With A less than B, we end up getting a limosón with an inner loop. So we're going to kind of do the same thing for this. So where is our major axis? Well, since that's plus, it's going to be positive. Since we're dealing with sine, it's y. So that means the majority of my limosón is going to be on the top axes. So A is 6, B is 4, which is kind of the same numbers, but now A is in between 1B and 2B's. So A plus B ends up being 6 and 4, which is also 10. But then A minus B ends up being 6 minus 4, which gives us a positive 2. So let's go to our graph and see what that looks like. So again, since it was plus and it was sine, we're going to have the majority of our graph on the top part of it. So we're going to go 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and plot a point. Then I'm going to go in the opposite direction, A minus B, which this time I can actually go the opposite direction too. Not like the limosón with inner loop where I was going up -2, which ended up going down 2. But now I can actually do that. And then no matter what limosón it is, we're going to go A the other direction. So A is 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what we end up getting is a limosón almost very similar to a cardioid, where we're going to be nice and rounded. I'm going to fix that a little bit. Oh, no. Very particular about my polar graphs. Still not perfect, but it still shows. So what do you end up seeing here? Well, this is going to be what we call a convex, or sorry, not convex. So this is what we call a dimpled limosón. And it's dimpled because of that little piece here that is kind of not like a cardioid. It doesn't go through the pole, but it looks dimpled. And again, for the sake of notes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to state that this was A plus B, this was A minus B, this was A, and that was A. All right, and then this last one. What happens if A is greater than or equal to 2B? Well, no matter what, we're still going to figure out the major axis first. Since it's subtraction between these two, it's going to be on the negative. since we're talking about cosine, x-axis. Again, a and b are always the positive version of those numbers. So that's when you're doing a plus b, it's 5 plus 2. B is not negative 2. So you end up getting 7 there, and a minus b is 5 minus 2, which is 3. So since the major axis is a negative x-axis, the majority of my graph is going to go to the left. So I'm going to go 7 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to go in the opposite direction, a minus b, which is 3. And then I'm going to go a up and down, which was 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the point about this one is that this a minus b value is getting kind of bigger or closer to that. So what ends up happening is you don't end up having a dimple anymore in this graph. Or maybe it shouldn't have a dimple. So the way that I usually like to talk about this in class is I want you to imagine a heart-shaped balloon. That heart-shaped balloon, the more you blow it up, eventually ends up not looking like a balloon anymore. That kind of part that makes it a balloon kind of becomes more and more popped out. So this is the one that we call a convex limacon, which again, in this class, you're not going to need to state what kind of limacon it is. You're not going to also have to label any of these axes, but I'm going to do it for the sake of notes. This was a plus b, this is a minus b, a, and a. And understand that all of those are going from the center of that coordinate plane. So these are what limacons look like. Make sure you know that that's what these look like and how we graph it, how we determine where the major axis is. It's always going to be a plus b, a minus b, and a. Just sometimes your a minus b is negative, which creates that inner loop. So hopefully you have fun with these and practice it and ask questions because these are pretty interesting. So good luck.